Hello, Scorpio. I hope you're ready, because what I'm picking up in this connection feels incredibly intense. Honestly, this doesn't feel like someone moving on. It feels like someone trying to move away from you, trying to convince themselves that they've turned the page, only to realize that every road somehow circles back to you. You know, Scorpio, there are some connections that leave a mark. Some people come into our lives and eventually become memories. But this feels different. This feels like the kind of connection that lingers long after the conversation ends. The kind that follows someone into quiet moments, into sleepless nights, into the spaces they thought they had already healed. As I sit here and look at the moon, I keep feeling like this person spent a long time hiding from their own emotions. Not from you, from themselves. Okay, because if they admitted how much they missed you, they would also have to admit how much losing you affected them. And I don't think they were ready for that. I feel like this person pulled away at some point. Maybe they became distant. Maybe they disappeared. Maybe communication started feeling strange. Maybe they acted like everything was fine. But here's the thing. The farther they walked, the louder your absence became. The more they tried to focus on work, responsibilities, distractions, or other people, the more something kept pulling their attention back towards Scorpio. It's almost frustrating, because I don't think this person expected to feel this way. I keep hearing someone saying, "Why can't I stop thinking about them?" And honestly, that's what feels so significant here. This wasn't supposed to happen according to their plan. As the moon sits here beside the Eight of Cups, it feels like someone who genuinely believed they could walk away. They thought distance would solve the problem. They thought time would make things easier. They thought silence would eventually erase the emotional attachment. Yet every step they took away from this connection somehow made them more aware of it. It's almost like they started noticing you everywhere. A song, a place, a scent, a phrase somebody said, a random memory showing up at the worst possible time. And suddenly there you were again, not physically, but energetically, emotionally, living inside their thoughts. You know what's interesting? I don't feel like this person was trying to be cruel. I feel like they were trying to control something they didn't fully understand. There was a part of them that felt overwhelmed by what they felt for you. Especially if you're dealing with somebody who normally likes to stay in control of their emotions. Because Scorpio energy has a way of making people feel things deeply, and not everybody knows what to do with that. Not everybody knows how to handle a connection that reaches places inside them they normally keep locked away. The Five of Cups is sitting here, and honestly, this card feels heavy, not dramatic, just heavy. Like somebody sitting alone with their thoughts, replaying old conversations, replaying mistakes. Replaying moments where they could have said something differently, done something differently, chosen differently. I keep feeling regret around communication. There may have been opportunities for honesty that never happened. Feelings that stayed hidden, words that got swallowed. And now those unsaid words seem to follow them everywhere. Because once the noise fades away, there is nothing left to distract them from what they truly feel. And that's when things become difficult. That's when the Nine of Swords starts showing up. Okay. This person is thinking about you far more than they let on, far more than they would probably admit. I almost feel embarrassed energy here, like they don't want anyone to know how much they still think about Scorpio. Because from the outside, they may appear calm. They may appear unaffected. They may appear like they've moved forward. But internally, that's a very different story. Internally, this person seems caught between pride and longing. Part of them keeps trying to justify the distance. Another part of them misses you so much that it becomes impossible to ignore. And the strange thing is that every attempt to suppress those emotions only seems to strengthen them. It's like trying not to think about something and then thinking about it even more. I also feel like this person checks in on you more than you realize. Maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe through old photos, maybe through memories they revisit when nobody is around. Because there is curiosity here, but deeper than curiosity, there is attachment. This connection never fully left them. And I think that realization has been unfolding slowly. Not all at once. One memory. One dream. One moment of loneliness at a time. The moon keeps drawing my attention back again. Because whatever this person has been hiding from, they can no longer avoid it completely. The emotions are surfacing. The truth is surfacing. And whether they like it or not, your energy continues finding its way into their world. I keep hearing the same message repeating itself. No matter how far they run, your energy keeps finding them. And for someone who genuinely believed they could leave this connection behind, that realization is becoming harder and harder to ignore. Honestly, Scorpio, something feels very different here. The energy shifts the moment I see judgment appear. It's almost like this person has reached a point where they can no longer distract themselves from what they've been feeling. You know how somebody can keep themselves busy for months? Work, responsibilities, friends, routines. They can fill every hour of their day with something. But eventually there comes a quiet moment when all of that noise fades away. And when it does, the truth starts speaking. That's what this feels like. I don't think this realization happened overnight. I actually feel like this person fought it for a while. Every time they felt themselves getting pulled towards you emotionally, they would find another reason to push it aside. Every time they started missing you, they would tell themselves it wasn't important. Every time they wondered what you were doing, they would convince themselves not to care. But something changed. Something inside them became impossible to silence. And the strange thing is, the more honest they became with themselves, the more they started seeing this connection differently. Okay, because I keep looking at the lovers and it doesn't feel like fantasy. It doesn't feel like infatuation. It feels like somebody realizing that what they experienced with you wasn't easily replaceable. That's the word that keeps coming through, replaceable. They thought they would eventually meet somebody else who made them feel the same way. They thought life would continue and the intensity would fade. Yet every comparison somehow brought them back to Scorpio. Every conversation, every connection, every attempt to move forward, something always felt missing. It's almost like they kept searching for something they had already found. Wow, that feels important. Because I don't think this person expected you to leave such a lasting impression on them. I think they underestimated the impact you would have. And that's where this awakening becomes uncomfortable. Because once somebody realizes they were wrong about something important, they have to face themselves. Not you, themselves. And that's where I see death showing up. Honestly, this card feels very personal here. Not dramatic, not chaotic, personal. Because I feel like this person is beginning to recognize patterns inside themselves that they've carried for years. Ways they protect themselves, ways they avoid vulnerability, ways they pull away when emotions become too real. For some of you, this may be somebody who has spent most of their life trying to appear strong, trying to appear unaffected, trying to maintain control. Yet, the more they sit with their feelings for you, the harder it becomes to keep those walls standing. I almost feel like they're having conversations with themselves, questions they've never asked before. Why did I react that way? Why was I so afraid? Why did I keep running from something that felt meaningful? Why did Scorpio still matter this much? And every answer seems to lead them deeper into this transformation. You know what keeps standing out to me? They're not looking at you through the same eyes anymore. Something has changed in their perspective. Because before, I think they were focused on what scared them about this connection. The intensity, the uncertainty, the risk, the possibility of getting hurt. But now, they're starting to focus on what they might lose if they continue pretending they don't care. And that's a completely different energy. It's almost like fear has changed directions. The thing they were afraid of before is no longer the thing keeping them awake. The thing keeping them awake is the possibility of never fully expressing what they feel. The possibility of letting somebody special disappear from their life because they were too afraid to be honest. And honestly, that realization seems to be hitting them hard. The star is sitting here and I can't stop looking at it. Because every time I do, I get this feeling of somebody quietly holding on to hope. Not necessarily talking about it, not necessarily showing it, but carrying it. It's there, almost like a small light they've been protecting. And I feel like that light has your name on it. Because even after everything that's happened, they still wonder, they still imagine, they still think about what could happen if the two of you actually sat down and spoke openly. No masks, no pride, no defensiveness, just honesty. For some of you, I think this person has replayed those imaginary conversations 100 times. They've practiced what they would say. They've imagined your reaction. They've thought about every possible outcome. And the funny thing is, the more they do that, the more real their feelings become. Because fantasy eventually gives way to truth. And the truth is much simpler than they expected. They care, deeply, more deeply than they wanted to admit, more deeply than they planned, more deeply than logic can explain. And once that truth entered the room, it became very difficult to push it back out again. I keep hearing somebody say, I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. And that feels like the center of everything. Not a dramatic declaration, not some grand gesture, just a quiet moment where somebody finally stops arguing with their own heart. Because for a long time, they were treating these feelings like something temporary, something that would pass, something they could eventually outgrow. Yet the more time passed, the stronger the connection seemed to become, not weaker, stronger. And that is exactly why this awakening feels so significant. Because they aren't discovering something new, They're finally accepting something that has been true for much longer than they wanted to believe. You know, Scorpio, something about this energy feels quieter than before, but in a very powerful way. Not because the feelings are fading. Honestly, it's the opposite. It's because this person has stopped running around trying to escape themselves. They are finally sitting with what they've been avoiding. The Hermit keeps pulling my attention, and every time I look at it, I see somebody spending more time alone than they normally would. Not because they want to isolate forever, not because they suddenly stopped caring about the world around them. It's almost like life itself forced them to slow down, forced them to listen, forced them to look at parts of themselves they normally keep busy enough to ignore. I don't think this process has been comfortable. Because when somebody begins to see themselves clearly, they also begin to see the choices they've made clearly, the relationships, the habits, the excuses, the distractions, the people they allowed access to their energy. Everything starts coming into focus. And what feels important here is that this person is no longer blaming circumstances for everything that happened. They're becoming more honest, not just about you, about themselves. Because I keep getting this feeling that they are recognizing how much of their life was built around survival rather than happiness. There were obligations, expectations, responsibilities, people who wanted things from them. Situations they stayed in because it felt easier than leaving. And little by little, those things started becoming heavier, almost impossible to carry. What's interesting is that I don't think Scorpio caused this transformation. I think Scorpio triggered it. There's a difference. You didn't create their lessons. You simply became the mirror that reflected what needed to change. And once they saw it, they couldn't unsee it. Death appears again. Wow, this card feels so deeply connected to their current journey. Because I don't see somebody trying to become a different person. I see somebody trying to become their real self. There's a version of them that's starting to disappear. The version that hides. The version that settles. The version that convinces themselves they're okay when they're not. And honestly, that process can feel messy. People often think transformation looks beautiful. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it looks like clarity. Sometimes it looks like freedom. But sometimes it looks like confusion before clarity arrives. Sometimes it looks like letting go of things you've known for years. Sometimes it means admitting that a path you've been walking is no longer meant for you. I keep feeling changes happening around them. Some of you may be dealing with somebody who is questioning their career, questioning their environment, questioning certain friendships, questioning certain family dynamics, not necessarily cutting everyone off, not necessarily making dramatic moves, but quietly asking themselves, does this still belong in my life? And the answers aren't what they used to be. The Six of Swords is sitting here, and honestly, this feels like somebody emotionally packing their bags, not physically, emotionally, leaving behind old versions of themselves, leaving behind old fears, leaving behind old stories, because there was a time when they genuinely believed certain things about themselves. Maybe they believed they weren't worthy of real love. Maybe they believed vulnerability made them weak. Maybe they believed relationships always end badly. Maybe they believed happiness was something that happened to other people. But those beliefs are starting to crack. And when beliefs crack, everything changes. Okay, I keep hearing somebody say, I don't want to live the same cycle anymore. That feels important, because this person isn't just missing you. They're questioning the entire mindset that caused them to lose you in the first place. And that is a very different type of growth. That's why I don't feel impulsive energy here. I don't feel somebody rushing. I don't feel somebody making promises they can't keep. I feel somebody trying to become stable enough to show up differently. Because here's the thing. Missing somebody is one thing. Loving somebody is one thing. Actually becoming the version of yourself that can sustain that love, that's something else entirely. And I think they're beginning to understand that. Temperance appears and everything softens. The energy becomes calmer, less reactive, less chaotic, less fearful. It's almost like they're learning patience, learning balance, learning how to trust timing instead of trying to force outcomes. Honestly, I think this person spent a long time fighting life, fighting emotions, fighting change, fighting uncertainty. But exhaustion has a funny way of teaching surrender. Eventually, people stop fighting because they realize the battle itself is what's hurting them. And that's what I see happening here. I see somebody putting down emotional armor they've been carrying for years. Not all at once, not perfectly, just little by little. One realization at a time, one healing conversation at a time, one honest moment at a time. You know what's beautiful? Every change they're making seems connected to a future they haven't fully stepped into yet. It's almost like they can feel something waiting for them on the other side of this transformation. Something more meaningful, something more authentic. And every time they think about that future, Scorpio somehow appears in the picture. Not because they're forcing it. Not because they're trying to create a fantasy. But because when they imagine the version of themselves they actually want to become, they realize that version no longer runs from connection. That version no longer hides from feelings. That version no longer chooses fear over honesty. And that realization seems to be changing everything from the inside out. There's something interesting happening here, Scorpio. The energy suddenly becomes much more alert, much more focused. Almost like somebody who has been spending all this time looking inward is finally beginning to look outward again. In the first place, their attention seems to go, is toward you. Page of Swords appears, and honestly, I laughed a little when I saw it because this feels exactly like somebody trying to act casual while secretly paying attention to everything. You know the type. The person who says they're fine. The person who says they've moved on. The person who claims they're focused on themselves. Yet somehow they know exactly when you post something. They notice when you disappear for a few days. They notice when your energy feels different. They notice things they shouldn't notice if they truly didn't care. And that's what keeps standing out. This person cares. More than they're comfortable admitting. More than they've probably admitted to anyone. I keep feeling them checking in from a distance. Not necessarily because they're trying to invade your space. It feels more emotional than that. Almost like they're searching for reassurance. Trying to answer questions they don't have the courage to ask directly. Are you happy? Are you seeing someone? Do you still think about them? Would you even want to hear from them? These questions feel constant, like they keep circling around in this person's mind. Okay, there's a nervousness here that wasn't present before. Because it's one thing to miss someone privately. It's another thing entirely to consider stepping back into their world. And I think that's where this person finds themselves. Standing at the edge of something. Thinking about reaching out. Thinking about opening a door that has remained closed for quite some time. The Page of Cups appears beside the Page of Swords, and suddenly the energy becomes much softer, almost vulnerable, because beneath all the observation, beneath all the curiosity, beneath all the caution, there's emotion, very real emotion, the kind that's difficult to hide forever. I actually feel like this person has been practicing conversations in their head, not once, not twice, over and over again. Different versions, different outcomes, different scenarios. What if Scorpio doesn't answer? What if Scorpio is angry? What if Scorpio doesn't trust me anymore? What if I say the wrong thing? Honestly, I think they've imagined every possibility. And because they've imagined every possibility, they've also delayed action. Because sometimes people convince themselves that preparation is progress. But eventually there comes a moment where preparation isn't enough anymore. Eventually something has to happen. And that's where the Eight of Wands starts getting louder. This energy feels restless. Like somebody sitting with a message they want to send. Somebody staring at a phone, opening a conversation, closing it, typing, deleting, typing again. You know what I'm getting? It's not that they don't know what they feel. That's not the issue anymore. The issue is finding the courage to say it. Because words make things real. Feelings can remain hidden. Thoughts can stay private. But the moment somebody speaks, everything changes. The moment somebody says, I've been thinking about you. The moment somebody says, I miss you. The moment somebody says, I haven't forgotten. There's no going back after that. And I think this person understands exactly how vulnerable that would make them. I also feel like they're becoming more aware of time. That's a strange message, but it keeps coming through. Time lost, time wasted, time spent pretending. Time spent avoiding conversations that should have happened long ago. And when people begin realizing how much time has passed, they often stop waiting for perfect conditions because perfection never arrives. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be risk. There will always be reasons to stay silent. And that's why this energy feels so significant. Something inside them is becoming stronger than their fear. Knight of Cups. Wow, this changes everything emotionally. Because this doesn't feel like somebody watching forever. This doesn't feel like somebody hiding forever. This feels like somebody whose heart is beginning to outweigh their hesitation. And honestly, Scorpio, I think that surprises even them. Because for a long time, they convinced themselves they needed more answers, more certainty, more proof, more time. But feelings don't always work that way. Sometimes feelings simply reach a point where they refuse to stay quiet. I keep hearing this person saying, I need to know, not in a controlling way, not in an obsessive way, just in a human way. They need to know where they stand. They need to know whether the connection they keep carrying around inside themselves still exists between the two of you, because uncertainty has become exhausting. And what feels beautiful here is that their motivation doesn't seem rooted in ego anymore. It doesn't feel like winning. It doesn't feel like proving something. It doesn't feel like being right. It feels like honesty. Simple honesty. The kind that people arrive at after they've spent enough time confronting themselves. The kind that emerges after transformation has stripped away the distractions. You know, I think there was a version of this person that wanted to appear unaffected, wanted to appear strong, wanted to appear completely in control. That version feels smaller now, because the person I'm looking at through these cards seems much more willing to acknowledge what their heart has been trying to tell them, and their heart keeps leading them back toward the same place, toward the same memories, toward the same connection, toward the same Scorpio they thought they could forget. The energy around them feels like somebody standing in front of a doorway they've been staring at for a very long time, not because they don't know what's behind it, because they know exactly what's behind it. It's the significance of opening it that makes their hands shake. Honestly, Scorpio, the energy shifts again. The moment Ace of Cups appears, because what I'm looking at no longer feels like somebody wrestling with their emotions. It feels like somebody who has finally stopped trying to negotiate with them. You know what I mean? There comes a point where feelings become so clear that denying them actually takes more effort than accepting them. And that's exactly what this looks like. This person has spent so much time analyzing, questioning, observing, healing, reflecting, changing, but none of those things removed what they feel for you. If anything, all of that distance seems to have made their emotions more honest, more focused, more intentional. The Ace of Cups feels surprisingly simple, not because the connection is simple, because the truth is becoming simple. They care, they miss you, they want to know if there's still something here worth nurturing. And for somebody who once felt overwhelmed by the intensity of this connection, that's a huge shift. Because I don't think they're looking at this through the lens of fantasy anymore. They're looking at it through the lens of possibility. Okay, that feels important because fantasy lives in imagination. Possibility asks, what can we actually build? And that's where the King of Pentacles catches my attention. Wow, this energy feels so different from where they started. Because the person I'm seeing here isn't focused on temporary emotions. They're focused on stability, consistency, showing up, following through, being somebody you can actually rely on. For some of you, this person may have spent years building success in other areas of life, career, responsibilities, financial goals, external achievements. Yet there was always something missing emotionally. And I think they're beginning to understand that success doesn't mean much when the person you want to share it with isn't standing beside you. There's something very mature happening inside of them. I don't feel somebody chasing excitement. I feel somebody craving substance. The kind of connection that survives difficult conversations. The kind of connection that remains steady during challenges. The kind of connection that isn't based on appearances or temporary attraction. And honestly, Scorpio, I think that's one of the reasons this connection keeps returning to their mind. Because it feels meaningful, not convenient, meaningful. The Four of Wands appears and suddenly I start feeling memories, not random memories, important ones. Moments where they felt understood, moments where they felt comfortable, moments where they felt seen. I think that's what surprises them the most, because they may have met many people throughout their life. But there was something about the feeling they experienced with you. A sense of belonging, a sense of familiarity, a sense of emotional safety. And the more they compare those memories to other experiences, the harder it becomes to dismiss them. You know, keep feeling this person, imagining a future, not in a dramatic way, not in a fairy tale way, in a very human way, thinking about ordinary things, conversations, shared routines, time together, building something gradually, creating memories instead of just revisiting old ones. And that tells me a lot. Because people don't usually imagine a future with somebody they intend to leave in the past. The energy keeps moving toward construction, toward creating, toward investing. And that feels very different from everything they've experienced before. The Hierophant appears, and honestly, I think this card makes them a little uncomfortable because it forces them to ask serious questions, not emotional questions, serious questions, questions about commitment, questions about values, questions about what kind of life they actually want, questions about who they want beside them when life becomes complicated. Because attraction is easy, chemistry is easy, fantasy is easy. Building something real, that's a completely different conversation. And that's the conversation I feel them having with themselves. I keep hearing somebody say, what if I stop being afraid of this? Not what if it fails, not what if it hurts, what if I stop being afraid? Because fear has influenced so many of their decisions in the past. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty, fear of needing somebody. Yet every time they imagine letting fear make the decision again, something inside them resists. Because they're tired, not physically, emotionally, tired of wondering, tired of avoiding, tired of carrying feelings that never get expressed, tired of pretending they're unaffected. And that's where Ten of Cups enters the reading. Wow, this feels deeply emotional. Not because it's perfect, because it feels genuine. I think this person is beginning to understand that happiness isn't something they find after everything becomes perfect. It's something they create by choosing what matters. And you matter. Maybe more than they expected. Maybe more than they planned. Maybe more than they ever intended. But that realization seems impossible to avoid now. I keep seeing them standing at a crossroads between the life they thought they wanted and the life that actually feels meaningful. And every time they look toward what feels meaningful, your energy is there, not demanding, not chasing, not forcing, just present. Almost like a quiet truth they've been circling around for a very long time. And the longer they sit with that truth, the more they seem to realize that what they want isn't another distraction, another temporary connection, or another lesson. What they want feels much simpler than that. They want something real, something they can hold on to, something they can invest in, something they can wake up and choose again tomorrow. And for the first time in a very long time, that possibility feels less frightening than losing it. And Scorpio, if there's one thing this reading keeps bringing me back to, is the fact that some connections leave a much deeper imprint than we realize at the time. Sometimes people need distance to understand what closeness truly meant. Sometimes they need silence to hear the truth they've been avoiding. And sometimes the very thing they tried to walk away from becomes the thing they can't stop carrying in their heart. Whatever is unfolding here, it feels like someone is seeing this connection through completely different eyes than before. Not through fear, not through confusion, but through a growing understanding of what truly matters to them. As always, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and trust your own intuition above anything else. Your journey is your own, and your heart already knows more than you think it does. That's all I've got for you for this reading. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. You all mean a lot to me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, Scorpio. Okay, bye-bye.